Hello, everyone. My name is Reed Gabriel, and today I'm going to be talking about my subject for the final project of this class, which is doing a literary analysis on the state of L2 motivation in Japanese EFL classrooms. So the research questions that I hope to answer over the course of this paper are that basically other studies, things that we've read in class, our text, it doesn't really seem to me to take into account the effect of specific cultures on English L2 motivation or demotivation. So with that said, I hope to answer these questions. Questions like, what general perceptions do Japanese students at various educational levels hold toward learning English? So like middle school, high school, even students who are about to graduate and go into college. And then trying to understand what factors influence their motivation or demotivation to learn English. And of course, trying to link these perceptions, these student perceptions, to relevant motivational theory, and trying to draw out different strategies or frameworks that appear like they could be the most useful in the Japanese EFL setting. Yeah. I just wanted to include like the reason that I wanted to do my study on this is that I've actually been selected to be an alternate language teacher in Japan through the JET program starting in August. So I just really want to know or try to get a basic idea of where my students are going to be coming from as far as their motivation and demotivation. I want to know what drives them, so that way, as I stated in my questions, I can think about strategies that will be most useful in teaching them. I mean, obviously this is going to be sort of a generalization. Things can change depending on the situation that you're in, that I'm going to be in. So yeah, I just want to let you guys know that was my personal reason. So in this presentation, I'm going to be covering, I want to just get over the historical context, student perceptions, relevant motivational theory, also tentative answers to the questions that I just posed, and then trying to form a conclusion based on that. And since this is still a work in progress, trying to tell you what my further research needs to be and how I want to further develop my research. And of course, the references at the bottom there. So I have the historical context listed here, which is cited pretty much from Fujimoto Adamson 2006. I know that there's a lot of dates here, but I figured that a good way to try to understand where the students are coming from is to try to understand the historical context of the institution in which they're in. So I think, you know, a lot of it can come from understanding that Japan was largely isolated from like 1603 until 1867. All commerce was banned with other countries. And of course, like English wasn't being spoken, you know, by most of the population, even in 1867. So then there's the first use of English language in 1872. And then you have 1901, the Goen method gets introduced, which is the audiolingual method, basically. And then you have how to analyze English sentences. So grammar translation gets introduced in 1905. And these two methods sort of continue on, even they exist today. And they've become part of the national curriculum, as well as this part of the entrance exam preparation and the way that English is taught and has been taught. Obviously, like around this time, you have the war starting, and so English wasn't taught during that period. And then thereafter, in 1947, when the Allies came in and kind of took things over for a bit. Then you had the restart of English education in junior high schools as part of the compulsory education. And right, the STEP test, the TOEIC test, which we still have, or they still have today. And now we have into the present time where it's kind of like this big national plan to cultivate Japanese who can use English. And that's where we find ourselves. That's kind of where the JET program actually came from, which was started in 1987. And so I'm going to look at 3 different authors' works on student perceptions of speaking English, learning English. So Berwick and Ross, 1989, they kind of looked at basically senior high school students who are graduating and moving into college and what happened to their motivation during that time. And they said that motivation to learn English peaks, or study English, not necessarily learn, but it peaks in the last year of high school. And this is because motivation is sort of manifested in this need to pass entrance exams. And that once these students are released from high school or graduate from high school, they kind of experience this complete lack of motivation because, you know, before it was this huge instrumental push to do it, and then suddenly there's no more reason. But that during this time is when, you know, they can start thinking about ways in which they might need to learn English, to communicate in English, maybe via business contacts, you know, jobs, things like that, travel. It all becomes possible at this age. And then going further into the future, McVeigh, 2002, has a very interesting idea of what he observed in the student perception of English, whereas it's kind of like a simulacrum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, but that English is kind of viewed as something that doesn't really have any relation to reality. You know, it's sort of like it's a school subject, and it's not a medium of communication that is spoken by millions of people in the world. It sort of becomes fantasized in this way as a means of, as he states, consuming otherness. And otherness can be just anything outside of their usual, the students' usual day-to-day lives, you know, outside of their school schedule and their studying schedule and extracurricular activity schedule. It's sort of like very exotic, you know. And when they actually have native speaker teachers like alts in their classes, there's sort of this clash between the fantasized English and then the real English, you know, being the fantasized term what they have in their minds, and then the real English what they hear the teacher speaking, the questions that they're asked. Yeah. Go on. Then Ryan, 2009, this book that he wrote. I just want to jump to these points. And similar to the authors that came before, clearly English is sort of clearly defined as an instrumental function and stripped of any communicative function, and purely instrumental. So he had a questionnaire survey that was conducted on 2,397 students. And sort of what his finding was, he was really trying to link in the L2 motivational self-systems as a means of, as the best theory to basically understand student motivation regardless of culture. So his line of questioning of research was very similar to my own. Like, how does culture affect it, and what transcends culture as far as motivational theories go? And then there's Kikuchi. I think we might have had a read for, I'm sorry if I don't remember, but for this class, his focus was on demotivation. There's a lot of articles, a lot of authors cited in this one work, which I want to look into all the guys that he was quoting, all the people that he was quoting. And what Kikuchi finds is that there's this disconnect between the MEXT goals, which is kind of like the Ministry of Education in Japan, as well as entrance exam content and what's actually happening in classes. So basically, MEXT is kind of saying right now, like, we need to have English for communicative purposes. You know, we want you to be able to communicate And then in class, students are still being taught largely grammar translation, grammar translation, grammar translation. And it's like, that's not really relevant to being able to actually communicate in language. So there's disconnect there. There's also a disconnect between what they're being taught in exam preparation and then what actually occurs in the exams. You know, that's kind of strange. You think they would have gotten that one right, but apparently grammar translation is taught for preparation to exams, but then few translation items are actually found on entrance exams, according to research that's cited in this article as well. And then motivation, yeah, comes from students, while demotivation comes from teachers. Maybe a little bit more on that later in the interest of time. So I kind of try to form some possible answers to my questions based on this and some other research that I've read, but I wasn't able to cite here. So kind of what I was thinking along the lines of what I'd already thought. So motivation in Japanese EFL classrooms is largely past tests. So this is definitely a form of instrumental motivation. It's good to have a solid understanding that that's where the majority of students are coming from. Looking at McVeigh, I thought it would be interesting to try to apply the idea of Kano and Norton's imagined communities, which I believe that we've gone over that as well. I don't remember if it was completely with an integrative motivation, but it's this idea that people will form their own conceptualization of what the language actually is and what it means to them, you know? So these students kind of have a fantasized version of English, which is maybe what they see in advertisements, maybe just what they see in movies. Sorry, that's my watch. But I thought it would be interesting if you tried to channel, see, they already have this imagined communities going on. So if you can channel that into something that's closer to reality and seeing English as a language that's actually spoken by people. And then Kikuchi, oh yeah, I thought it was, so looking at how demotivation comes from the teachers and the institution, I think is very interesting that because the institutional goals aren't clear, you kind of create this undercurrent of demotivation where it's like students are realizing that what is claimed to be taught to them isn't actually being taught. And so that just kind of, I think, puts them off, you know? Like it would definitely put me off. So regardless of what class it is, what school it is, that's just what's going on, and that's kind of gonna feed into underlying current of demotivation. So looking at some tentative conclusions based on that Kikuchi article, making institutional policies more consistent with what's actually happening in classes. I think as an alt teacher, this might be kind of difficult to do, borderline impossible. It's going to take a lot of time, I think, just as the country itself develops. But I think there still might be possibilities for me to be able to teach students something different from what they get in their classes, such as pronunciation. I've been taking a pronunciation course, and I can tell you that pronunciation is very important to being able to actually communicate in a language, to being able to be understood by someone, and it gives you confidence to be able to speak. And I think it relates to the proposed institutional goals, which therefore can build a clearer application of this goal-oriented theory. Like, this is what you need to, you know, this is what everybody needs to do in order to accomplish this big, overarching goal that the institution has. As I stated earlier, that imagine communities that the students have developed of English, although they might not be the most realistic, they're still there, which means that they can be redirected. And I mean, I list movies, TV, popular culture. I'm trying to enforce English is not just a subject that you're studying. But I also thought it'd be interesting if I could do things like record my own conversations with friends and family. That way, you know, they would see me communicating in the language and see that it's more of a part of my life than just what they get from me as an English teacher. And then I've started to think, you know, maybe this instrumental motivation the students have is a product of their environment. Like, it's because all they've been exposed to is a certain style of teaching, right? The style of teaching that, as I said, has existed in Japan to teach English for about 100 years. You know, and if all they've ever been exposed to is this one way of teaching, how are they going to be able to develop intrinsic motivation? You know, because they're subjective to their own beliefs, but I think that those beliefs can be influenced by the L2 environment and by the L2 learning experience. So if they can be given, you know, different kinds of activities in which to practice actually using English, then they might have a chance to actually have fun. You know, I don't think, I mean, maybe some people find grammar drills, grammar translation to be really fun, but for those that don't, it's an opportunity to have fun learning the language, which is sort of at the core of intrinsic motivation. So further research and development, you know, obviously this is all tentative. My conclusions are tentative. I want to do more research, have a critical look at some more articles. I want to look at more things, maybe along the lines of the Kikuchi article. You know, obviously it's more recent than the ones that I've listed. I'd also appreciate it if anybody could give me some suggestions for the questions that maybe I should be asking. Any questions that you have for me, as I think they'll be very useful in helping me to develop this paper into more consistent, more flowing, more balanced work. As right now, I think it's a little bit, you know, it's just, I think it's a very broad topic, and I'm still in the process of trying to narrow it down into exactly what I'm trying to talk about. Anyway, these are my references that I used, and yeah, I just want to thank everybody for watching this, for listening to this. Got a little bit over the time, but that's okay. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I look forward to watching yours as well. So, bye-bye.